Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Council President Cynthia Newbill, Councilwoman Ann Francis Lambert, and also by our Chief Administrative Officer, Lincoln Saunders. We're here today to share some positive news for our tax-paying property owners here in the city of Richmond. And as many of you all know, the growth and success of our great city has naturally increased the value of property in the great city of Richmond. This has enabled us to provide and even expand needed city services to our residents and business owners on a real estate property tax rate that hasn't gone up in 14 years. And while increasing property values are a sign of economic prosperity, the rapid increase has, in some cases, given rise to levels of assessments that can place an unexpected and undue burden on our property owners. And that is why today I'm announcing the Five Back Initiative. This proposal will use fiscal year 2022 surplus dollars to provide relief with a one-time 5-cent real estate tax rebate across the board for property owners. Our Five Back Initiative is the equivalent of the current tax rate of $1.20 of assessed value being cut to $1.15. So, a home assessed at $350,000 and a real estate tax bill of $4,200 would receive a one-time rebate of $175. Now, working with City Council, this rebate will be provided via check in early 2023. Now, on November 14th, I, along with Council President Newbill, Councilwoman Lambert, Councilwoman Jordan, Councilwoman Lynch, Councilman Addison, Councilman Jones, will introduce an ordinance to commit up to $18 million of the fiscal year 2022 surplus for the purpose of the 5-cent rebate for qualifying real property owners. I want to thank our co-patrons for supporting this pragmatic solution to rising assessments in the city of Richmond. Folks, as I've said before, this administration is about the fix. Our Five Back Initiative strikes the right balance of providing relief to taxpayers while being fiscally responsible in meeting our obligations, maintaining the delivery of services, and protecting our city's strong financial standing into an unpredictable future. Now, given the uncertain economic climate, my administration, you should know that each penny reduction in the real estate tax is equivalent to $3.4 million in lost revenue, and each penny reduction reduces the city's debt capacity used to create and build capital projects in the city. It reduces that debt capacity by approximately $4.2 million. At this time, permanently cutting the tax rate would impact our ability to provide core services to our residents and our community. It would also mean that we would not be able to keep up the increasing maintenance needs of our roadways, our parks, our libraries, and our schools. However, I think we can achieve a balance by providing one-time relief to our property owners. We also have the opportunity to make some changes in how we align our budget and assessment cycles as well. Changes that can go a long way towards increasing budget credibility and prevent the kind of sticker shock a number of our property owners have experienced this year in their assessments. By changing some of our current processes, we can reduce the large variances from what we adopt our budget and where we end up at the end of the year. Let me highlight two of them today. First, we will ask the Virginia General Assembly to allow the City of Richmond to offer a long-time owner occupants program, or LOOP, to qualifying long-time property owners. The exemption would effectively keep assessments level in future years and protect this vulnerable population. Folks, this is an anti-displacement tool, a generational wealth building tool. But unfortunately, due to the Dillon's rule, we cannot implement without authority from the Commonwealth of Virginia. So we must fight for that local authority, and we will. And finally, we have been working with the council's city assessor that resides in the legislative branch to better align the city's assessment and budget cycles. These cycles need to be readjusted to include the actual assessment once the city assessor has completed his work. Now, right now, we are proposing and adopting a budget that is based on assessment projections instead of an actual one. Realigning the assessment and budget cycles will help fix this and is only one of several process improvements that we will explore. So folks, to sum it up today, we will introduce the Five Back Initiative with members of council on November 14th, which includes a one-time 5 cents tax rebate, real estate tax rebate, to be provided early next year. Secondly, we will seek General Assembly approval of a long-time owner occupants program for the city that we can use to keep assessments level and provide relief to long-time homeowners as they do in places like Philadelphia. And finally, we will work with the city assessor's office and city council to enact new policies that align our assessment and billing cycles, thereby producing more accurate budgets. Now, I would be remiss if I did not tell my friends in the administration that I'm incredibly proud of their work in preparing these impactful and pragmatic solutions that will both assist taxpayers and ensure we can continue to provide high-quality city services and improve our budgeting practices. I would also like to thank our members of City Council. I believe we have now 6 members of City Council who have signed on, five members of City Councils who have 6. It's 6, folks. 6 members of City Council have signed on as co-patrons of this ordinance that we'll be introducing on November 14th for the Five Back Initiative. We look forward to working with our council and state legislators to bring these solutions to fruition. And with that, I will now turn it over to my friend, Councilwoman, Council President, Dr. Cynthia Newbill. Dr. Newbill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Stoney. I really appreciate the due diligence of your administration in preparing this 5 cent real estate tax rebate. This is great news for Richmonders. As I know you're aware, all members of council have been getting calls and emails regarding the need for tax relief, and we have been working with your administration to find a solution. This proposal presented today is a collaborative proposal of a one-time 5 cent real estate tax rebate, which is the equivalent, as you've indicated, of a real estate tax rate cut to $1.15 for all property owners. And so on behalf of Richmonders, I say thank you. Given the current economic uncertainty and the $191 million in deferred maintenance that was just presented at City Council's recent retreat, administration will definitely continue to advocate for remedies to help our residents. Additionally, during this upcoming General Assembly session, as you've mentioned, We will certainly look to work collaboratively to enact comprehensive reform and legislation like Loop that you talked about. I just want to, on behalf of council colleagues, and again, on behalf of Richmonders, thank you and the administration for hearing, as we did, the requests and concerns of Richmonders in terms of seeking relief with this real estate tax rate. And so, again, Mayor, I thank you, the administration, council colleagues, for the due diligence, and I know you call that a 5-back initiative. I just like to think of it as the 5-cent real estate tax rebate. That's equivalent to a real estate tax rate of $1.15, and I think that's so critical for Richmonders, and I'm just so thankful and appreciative and look forward to our adoption of that legislation.
Thank you, Dr. Newbill.
And with that, we'll take any questions that you might have on the 5-cent tax relief plan. David Rett.
Mr. Mayor, I think you had talked about the rebate coming from surplus from fiscal '22, $18 million. Curious to know how much of the surplus is going that way and how much, I'm assuming you would keep as kind of a safety cushion.
The question is, how much of the $18 million surplus?
How much of the surplus is the $18 million?
Yes, how much of the surplus is $18 million? We're going to have the Chief Administrative Officer.
Well, thank you, David. So, as you may be aware, we will not actually finish our annual review, the former CAFR, now called the ACFR, until later this month. So we will not know the total surplus and therefore what percentage of the surplus it is until that is completed. The finance team, Director Sheila White, is doing a great job making sure that we are sticking and getting the mayor's, I think, 6th year in a row of getting that done on time, and we'll know the final numbers then. We are confident that it is at a level that will accommodate the $18 million rebate, total cost of the rebate, but we will not know what the delta will be and how much additional surplus there will be until the audit's completed.
Presumably you're comfortable that there's enough for a cushion because...
Yes.
The other question I think the mayor and Dr. Newbill had referred to was the economic uncertainty. I think I have seen in other cities what happens with a real estate tax cut if a recession comes, and I'm wondering if that's kind of what the thinking is here.
The question was the thing about the economic uncertainty that we're about to, we may encounter in the future years, how other cities have dealt with it. Well, David, we can only look back at the history here in Richmond. I believe that the city council at the time, before the Great Recession, reduced the real estate tax rate. Although I believe members of the executive branch at the time said they didn't think that was a good idea. And sure enough, when 2008 came, there was a recession that devastated our city budget, the ability to fund services, the ability to do the certain capital maintenance that's necessary. And we have been recovering from that for these last, 14 years. So, I mean, you look at the salaries of our employees, they're the ones that really took it on the chin when the recession struck Richmond. Our city employees, they didn't receive cost of living adjustments, things of that nature for many, many years. It was this administration that began to invest in the human capital of the city. But also you've seen us invest in, the physical capital as well, as, new buildings are rising, new city buildings are rising around the city as well. So we've learned our lesson, I think. We're being cautious. And I would say we're being conservative about this too. This is being fiscally prudent in an uncertain time. And I think all local governments have to do that right now. And you'll likely see the state government do the same thing. We always have to prepare for that rainy day, right? And we pray that it doesn't rain. But if it does, we will be prepared.
Additional questions on the rebate proposal. Ned?
Apologies if my math is incorrect, but I guess I'm just curious how y'all landed on the 5-cent reduction. I feel like that's maybe a 4-ish% kind of rebate, but I think that the total value increase was closer to 13%, so it seems like you could have been a little more generous. Is there a reason for it?
Well, Ned Council right now that want a full cut of the tax rate. We believe in a more balanced approach. We offered up a tax rebate plan that included a 4-cent tax rebate. After many conversations with council, with members of City Council, we've discussed, we've collaborated, and we've found consensus on a 5-cent tax rebate, hence the 5 Back initiative. And so I think it's balanced. It will provide relief here in early 2023. We know right now there are families all throughout the city of Richmond, in all corners of the city, who are struggling to, meet the needs of their families as inflation begins to rise, things of that nature. This will put some dollars back into their family budgets so they can use it on things that are meaningful to them.
So am I reading you right? It's just what you guys could politically agree upon?
I think we found a consensus at 5, and I'm glad to have the support of 6 members of City Council.
Who wanted to go higher than 5? Did anyone?
I don't think we had anybody who wanted to go. I know that Catherine Jordan wanted, we had it 4, and Councilwoman Jordan wanted to go to 5. I think we all have found consensus at 5.
Surplus, as well as the would also just briefly speak to the mayor, if I could. And so let me just acknowledge this. There are members of everyone would like to see us do more. We have to balance that with what finance is comfortable that we're going to be able to cover with surplus. So Mayor, President Newbill, others have absolutely asked, how far can we push this? And we are looking at that. This is what we're comfortable with today. We need to introduce it prior to the audit being completed in order to meet our accounting rules under GADSB. So there's some both accounting practices and legal stipulations we need to stay within the confines of in order to do this according to state law and those accounting guidelines. Would just add to what the mayor said earlier with the challenge of our current cycle of assessments and billing. Most localities, you assess over the year, you get your completed land book, and you build your next year's budget off of that. Some years ago, probably about 15 years ago in the city, we moved to a concurrent cycle where we do assessments and billing in the same year. It was part of the city getting to more financial health at the time when we were at a point where we were issuing debt to pay payroll, which is not good for city's health. So in order to add the additional payment, I think they also at the same time broke the payment of the property tax from 1 bill payment to 2. So it was the right move for the city at the right time, but fixing the schedule, coming more in alignment with what other localities do, where you go into your budget knowing exactly what land values are and what you are going to be billing, as opposed to how the city has been building the budget for as long as I've been here, which is working with the assessor to get a projection of how much values will grow, budgeting based off of that, and then because that projection is almost always a conservative projection, that's how the city gets to these outsized surpluses that leave citizens wondering, we know we have a lot of needs in the city. How is there this much surplus? And the reality is because we're basing a huge portion of our budget off of a projection versus an actual value. And so holding the tax rate steady at this time will enable us to address our assessment cycle in the next year so that we can get into a more appropriate setting where individuals will get an assessment one year and know they won't be
As a city, we have put an emphasis on strengthening our financial muscle as a city, how we handle the finances of the city, how we administer the finances of the city. And this would not be possible for the hard-working men and women of our finance team. We've been able to go to Wall Street on many occasions and receive high marks for the work that's been done over the course of the last 6 years. We could not do this a decade ago. And so I'm grateful for their work, Mr. Saunders and your team, and Sabrina Joy Hogg and Sheila White, a number of individuals, Jason May. This is a strong team. This is why we're able to do the things that the counties are doing now. Couldn't do that a decade ago. But this administration can.
Any further questions on the tax rebate proposal? Jad?
Thanks for taking our questions. I think when some listeners might hear something about a property tax rebate, they're going to think about, these are people that already have existing wealth. Can you talk a bit about sort of that? What would you say to them in terms of like, who's kind of the budget surplus?
Well, the question is, some will say that this is though there are people out there who have existing wealth, they don't need a rebate or whatnot. What we're doing is, let me phrase this correctly. We're doing everything we can to provide relief to those who need it the most. However, we have to administer this rebate within the confines of the Virginia Code. And you cannot treat property owners differently under Virginia Code. And that's why, a part of the Fight Back Initiative, you see that we are going to pursue the loop legislation. So for those who are the most vulnerable, who've been in their homes for a very long time, we want them to stay. Growth is good. Let me say that again. Growth is good. But there's a flip side to that. And that's what we're experiencing in some of our neighborhoods in the East End and parts of North Side. We see folks being displaced. We don't want to see that. That's why we have to do everything we can to pursue different legislation that gives us the authority to focus on those vulnerable communities. But what we can do right now with the Fight Back Initiative is provide this rebate and this relief across the board for all property owners in the city.
Just kind of a context question about the loop. So, there's been, it seems like there's a lot of people that have moved to Richmond, just especially since the pandemic. Do you have an idea of kind of like what that looks like in terms of sort of, the effect that this would have now versus then? I guess these are property owners that have been around for a while, so this kind of predates that. But,
What part predates that?
When does the loop sort of like long time occupancy, like what is that? Is there like can you kind of describe what that is in terms of, is it?
Sure, I can describe that, but also I want to remind you that in order for the loop to go into effect, the General Assembly, the House and the Senate have to agree to it, and the governor has to sign the legislation. So it's just not like, we go and say, hey, can we do this? And they say, yeah, it doesn't work that way. We got to go through a whole legislative process for all this. So before we start talking about who gets this and all that, let's get the legislation passed first. So if you're a member of the Richmond delegation out there, in the greater Richmond delegation out there, we want you to support this initiative so we can provide this sort of long-term relief for property owners, not just in Richmond, but across the entire Commonwealth.
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. No, we're good, Mayor.
Just really quickly, what criteria though would you ask for? Like, what are you going to send Ron across the street with? Like, what's your first?
Briefly, I'll just.
Can I just say that right now we are able to provide relief to those who are seniors, veterans, and disabled, right? We don't, right? Localities are allowed to provide that relief right now. We think that you should be able to provide relief to those individuals who've stayed in their home for a very long time, lived in Richmond for decades, or for those at a certain economic level, socioeconomic level, right? Right now, we can't do that because the code prevents us from doing that. And so that's why we're asking for a little help from members of the General Assembly. And we think this is practical.
So based on time living in a certain place,
It would be combination, and if you're interested, Betsy Carr, I believe, actually carried the legislation last year. It was either carried forward or not heard last year. There is a constitutional component to it as well, which makes the passage, require a couple of different steps. So you can look at the legislation and how it's constructed. Ideally, the localities would be able to set the thresholds either of number of years of ownership as well as your income thresholds. It also can include components such as allowing for heirs to receive that same benefit. So if a parent passes it on to a child, but in order to prevent displacement, we try to limit the tax implications for that heir so that they can stay in the home and stay in these neighborhoods. It partially answers the other question from VPM, but one of the reasons why relief is so critical now is that as the city has grown and expanded, it's not just values in our higher income or higher value communities that are seeing large assessment increases. It's South Side, it's East End,
That's
it's
right.
North
Yes.
Side.
That's
It's
right.
a lot of our historically either more challenged or
Lower
lower
socioeconomic areas, yeah.
areas that are seeing the largest percentage increases over the last 2 to 3 years because people are moving to the city, looking to purchase homes, and it's making it competitive across the whole city. So if an individual is seeing a double-digit or in some cases, in 10, 20, 30% increase in a year, that certainly is a challenge for somebody in a lower socioeconomic capacity to respond on the yearly basis.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
All right, good job.
Thanks.
You know, it's not available to anyone